What if the real key to healing your body isn't hidden in a hospital, but deep within your spirit? You've probably heard stories, maybe even experienced one, where medicine falls short, where doctors are left without answers, and yet somehow healing still happens. Miraculous, unexplainable, impossible. Or is it? What if there's a deeper law at work, one that science is only beginning to touch, but that mystics like Edgar Cayce were already decoding nearly a century ago? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. Now, let's step into the world of Cayce's astonishing revelations, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Known as the Sleeping Prophet, Edgar Cayce documented over 14,000 readings, and among his most profound discoveries was something he called the Jesus Christ vibration, a spiritual frequency capable of activating healing where conventional medicine often reaches its limits. This isn't about religion. In fact, Cayce went to great lengths to explain that this vibration isn't bound by dogma or belief systems. It's not a doctrine, it's spiritual physics, a living energy embedded in the very fabric of who we are, available to anyone, regardless of background, faith, or tradition. And its power? It lies in its resonance with what Cayce identified as the spiritual centers of the human body, energy fields many now associate with chakras or subtle energetic systems that science is only beginning to acknowledge. When these spiritual centers are aligned with this divine frequency, something extraordinary happens. Physical conditions begin to shift. Emotional weight starts to lift. The body, often considered just a biological machine, responds like a finely tuned instrument, once again vibrating in harmony with its divine blueprint. Has this ever happened to you? A moment where healing came from somewhere deeper, more mysterious, more profound than any pill or procedure could provide? Cayce believed that many ailments begin not in the body, but in a disconnection from our spiritual essence. And in his readings, he consistently returned to the same truth. When we restore that connection, when we align with what he called the Christ vibration, we don't just feel better, we remember who we are. Stay with me until the end, because this journey may shift the way you understand health, wholeness, and your own inner power. We'll explore how this healing vibration operates, how it can be accessed, and why Cayce believed it was not just a technique, but a way of being, a frequency of divine love, pulsing just beneath the surface of our awareness, waiting to be tapped. And this is just the beginning, because what Cayce discovered next, not just about how this vibration works, but about how anyone can access it, will open doors to healing that modern science has only begun to imagine. Ready to unlock it? Let's continue. What if the energy running through your body was never just biological, but spiritual, intelligent, and deeply responsive to how you think, feel, and love? That's exactly what Edgar Cayce uncovered through more than 14,000 documented readings, each one a piece of a much larger puzzle, connecting the invisible threads between spiritual energy and physical health. These weren't abstract theories or vague ideas. They were detailed revelations, cases where emotional wounds turned into physical ailments, and where healing didn't come from pills or surgeries, but from restoring a person's alignment with a higher vibration, what he called the Jesus Christ vibration. Cayce noticed something remarkable. Every time someone tuned into this specific frequency of divine love, something shifted. Not just in their emotions, but in their body's actual response. Heart rate, inflammation, pain, even chronic conditions. It's as if the body recognized this frequency as home, as the true default setting it was designed to operate on. What makes this even more intriguing is that Cayce didn't just talk about spiritual concepts, he mapped them out. He described energy centers in the body, similar to what many traditions call chakras, that function as gateways between our physical experience and spiritual state. And each of these centers responds to different frequencies, especially those tied to elevated emotions like compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and love. But here's the hidden truth. Most of us walk through life with those centers blocked. We carry stress in our gut, tension in our chest, grief in our throat. Over time, those energetic blockages become physical patterns, illnesses, fatigue, emotional numbness, and while medicine might treat the symptom, it often misses the underlying frequency that's out of sync. This is where Cayce's work takes us beyond what textbooks and clinics can reach. He believed the body doesn't just respond to chemistry, it responds to consciousness. Every thought, every emotion, every intention sends a vibrational signal, and when those signals match the Christ vibration, the frequency of divine love and unity, the body begins to restore itself, not because it was broken, but because it was waiting for the right signal to remember how to heal. Imagine that, healing not as an external intervention, but as a return to your original design. What Cayce revealed was a behind-the-scenes mechanism most never even consider, a spiritual blueprint encoded within us, waiting to be activated not by effort, but by alignment. And once activated, it doesn't just affect the body. It touches every aspect of your life, your relationships, your clarity, your peace of mind. It redefines what it means to truly be whole. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how specific emotions, thoughts, and even environments can shift your entire energetic state, and how this vibration interacts with the spiritual laws that govern healing, purpose, and transformation. Put down in the comments, "This makes sense to me." It's not just stress or fear that weighs on your chest, it's a vibration, a frequency, a disruption in the natural rhythm your soul was designed to move with. Edgar Cayce saw this with undeniable clarity. He described how negative emotions like fear, anger, and separation don't just affect your mood, they distort the energetic patterns within the body, interfering with the natural flow of healing. It's like static on a signal. You're still sending and receiving, but the message gets scrambled. The more disconnected you are from love, from wholeness, from unity, the harder it becomes for your body to function in alignment with its original design. Cayce understood that these spiritual centers, what many traditions recognize as chakras, don't operate in isolation. They're part of a larger ecosystem of energy, each one resonating with specific emotional states. And when we consistently dwell in emotions, rooted in fear or resentment, the centers begin to tighten, close, shut down. The body speaks louder, trying to signal that something deeper is off. Pain becomes persistent, fatigue becomes familiar, and the deeper cause remains untouched. But then something incredible happens when we shift, when, instead of resisting or numbing, we choose to realign. That realignment, subtle but powerful, occurs the moment we begin to embody the frequency of love, compassion, forgiveness, and above all, unity. This is the essence of what Cayce called the Jesus Christ vibration, not a religious ideal, not a distant myth, but a living, breathing frequency of divine love made manifest in human form, a template, as he called it, for how we are meant to live, think, feel, and heal. Jesus wasn't just an icon to Cayce, he was a vibrational model. His life expressed the full embodiment of spiritual alignment. Every gesture, every word, every healing moment was an outpouring of this divine frequency. And Cayce's message was that we too are capable of tuning into it, not because we need to be perfect, but because we are wired for this connection. It's built into our spiritual anatomy. This understanding changes everything. Healing is no longer about fixing what's broken. It becomes a process of returning to what's real, to what's already there beneath the noise. The truth is, your body remembers the feeling of love. It remembers connection. It responds instantly when you shift out of survival mode and into presence, intention, and surrender. This isn't about control. It's about resonance, and resonance creates results. What Cayce revealed is a kind of behind-the-scenes map to human transformation, a guide not just to feeling better, but to becoming whole again. The Christ vibration is the code, and we each have the capacity to unlock it, not just through belief, but through practice, mindset shifts, and daily decisions that bring us closer to that loving frequency. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how the alignment of our thoughts, emotions, and spiritual intentions begins to awaken what Cayce called the divine healing force that lives within each of us. Put down in the comments, "I'm also on this path." There's something quietly revolutionary about what Edgar Cayce revealed. Not just that healing is possible through spiritual alignment, but that the power behind it lives within us already, waiting patiently to be activated. You don't need to be a mystic, a saint, or even particularly religious. What matters most is your willingness to open, to serve, and to step into the frequency of love with intention. Cayce described this process as aligning with Christ consciousness, a state not of worship, but of vibration, a resonance with the divine blueprint encoded into your being. And when this alignment begins, something profound stirs beneath the surface. It's not always immediate or dramatic. Sometimes it's a soft unraveling. The tension in your chest loosens, a long-held emotion rises to be released. Your perspective shifts almost imperceptibly. But those tiny movements are the beginning of something much greater. Cayce called it the divine healing force, not something external, but an internal current of life, intelligence, and restoration that flows when you're no longer fighting against your own truth. This is the hidden truth behind so many unexplained recoveries, emotional breakthroughs, even spiritual awakenings. The body is deeply intelligent, but it can't override a mind trapped in fear or a heart closed to connection. And so illness appears, not as punishment, but as a message, a signal that something in your energy field has drifted from its natural rhythm, that somewhere along the journey, a part of you forgot the sound of home. That's what makes the Jesus Christ vibration so different. It doesn't suppress symptoms. It speaks directly to the root spiritual causes of illness, gently reorienting the soul toward harmony. Cayce often described this like tuning an instrument. You're not replacing the strings. You're simply bringing them back into pitch. And once they vibrate in unison again, healing unfolds as a byproduct of energetic truth. So much of what we call illness is really disconnection. Disconnection from purpose, from love, from spirit. You've felt it before. That heaviness that doesn't have a medical name. That fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. It's the weight of being out of sync with your soul. And yet, with one decision, one shift in mindset, one moment of surrender, that weight begins to lift. Because when you remember who you are, your body does too. And that's the most impactful part of this entire journey. The realization that true healing isn't something you chase, it's something you uncover. It's not outside of you, it's encoded in your being, accessible through presence, humility, and love. And as Cayce showed again and again, once that vibration is activated, it moves through every part of your life, your body, your relationships, your clarity, bringing coherence where there was once chaos. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how illness begins as spiritual discord, and how the process of remembering, forgiving, and attuning allows us to access the healing force that medicine can't always reach. Put down in the comments, "This feels true to me." There's something quietly powerful about the way healing actually begins. Not in a dramatic flash or instant miracle, but in the stillness of a decision, the moment you choose to lean into love instead of fear. Edgar Cayce understood this intimately. He observed over and over again that when a person genuinely oriented their thoughts, emotions, and actions toward love, something extraordinary happened. Not just spiritually, but biologically. The body responded. The energy field softened. The soul, long dormant under layers of anxiety, resentment, and doubt, began to stir with light again. It's not about perfection. It's about alignment, a conscious, ongoing decision to live in harmony with the frequency of love that the Christ vibration embodies. And that alignment doesn't require anything external. It begins through simple but intentional practices, meditation, prayer, and the quiet but radical choice to set your intention toward healing, both for yourself and others. This is the real behind-the-scenes work that shifts everything. The kind of transformation that doesn't scream for attention but rewires your entire experience from the inside out. When Cayce spoke about healing, he wasn't just talking about symptom relief. He was pointing to something deeper, the restoration of connection. When you meditate with the intention of opening your heart, When you pray not to get something but to become something, you start to reconnect the soul to its original current. You plug back into the divine circuitry that's always been available, but too often clouded by noise, distraction, or pain. This is where the first principle of vibrational healing begins to take form: attunement through spiritual practice. And it's not about rituals or routines for their own sake, it's about resonance. Each time you sit in stillness, each time you breathe with awareness, each time you whisper a prayer of gratitude or extend a thought of compassion, you're tuning the frequency dial on your consciousness closer and closer to divine clarity, like adjusting the signal on a radio, until suddenly, what was once static becomes melody, coherence, truth. These moments add up. The body remembers, the heart begins to reopen, and little by little, the energy that once felt heavy starts to lift. You feel more present, more grounded, more receptive, not just to healing, but to life itself. This is where mindset becomes medicine, and where intention becomes impact. The transformation doesn't just happen in the cells, it happens in the way you see the world, the way you carry yourself, the way you show up for others. Cayce taught that the Christ vibration flows most freely through those who align with it through practice, not once, but daily, like tending a sacred inner fire. And it's not about being devout, it's about being available, being willing to become a channel for something greater than yourself, willing to let go of resistance and step into that deeper current where true healing flows, not from force, but from surrender. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how this spiritual sensitivity grows stronger with time, and how the healing energy becomes more accessible the more you devote yourself to serving rather than seeking. Write in the comments, "I feel this within me." There's something profoundly honest about the way real healing energy moves. It doesn't chase attention. It doesn't demand credit. It flows quietly, freely, through those who show up not to be seen, but to serve. Edgar Cayce made this clear in his work again and again. The vibration we call divine doesn't respond to self-serving motives. It doesn't bend to willpower or personal agendas. Instead, it recognizes purity of heart, those moments when you reach beyond yourself, not to get something, but to give, to lift, to love. That's the hidden truth behind vibrational attunement. It's not just about technique or repetition, it's about intention. The energy knows when you're aligned, and it knows when you're pretending. Cayce observed that when someone approached healing with the desire to be a vessel rather than a savior, the results were radically different. Healing became smoother, deeper, and often unexpected, because the focus wasn't on the outcome, but on the offering. This is where transformation begins, not in fixing what's broken, but in surrendering the need to control the process. That shift in mindset, from "how do I fix this?" to "how can I serve through this?" is subtle, but it opens a doorway that ego simply can't walk through. And that's what allows the vibration to enter, not because you deserve it more, but because you've made space for it. And from that space emerges what Cayce called the second principle, the laying on of hands with spiritual intention. It's one of the most ancient practices across all traditions, and yet most people misunderstand its essence. The act of placing hands on another isn't about transferring personal power. It's about stepping aside. It's about becoming still enough inside that divine energy can move through you, unobstructed, untouched by pride or fear. The impact is immediate, not just for the one receiving, but for the one offering. Something in the room changes. Time feels slower. A kind of sacred presence fills the air. It's not magic, it's resonance. Two people, two energy fields, aligning in love, trust, and presence. And through that alignment, something higher emerges, not created, but remembered. Cayce emphasized that the true healer never claims the healing, because the moment you claim it, you interrupt it. The moment your ego takes ownership, the channel narrows. But when you step back, when you recognize yourself simply as an instrument, no different than a tuning fork, held by the hands of something far greater, you allow the energy to reach the places even medicine cannot touch. That's the real power behind this principle. It humbles you. It teaches you that the most meaningful impact comes not when you try to be the answer, but when you become available to it. And when that availability is consistent, when it's offered over and over without needing praise or validation, you begin to notice a change not just in the people you support, but in your own life. Peace arrives, clarity deepens, and a quiet joy begins to settle in your being. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how healing through touch, intention, and humility awakens not only the body, but the deeper purpose of why we're here to begin with. Put down in the comments, I offer with open hands. There's a kind of silence that surrounds true healing. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of ego. Edgar Cayce often spoke about this quiet space, the one where the most profound transformations take place. He knew that for the Christ vibration to move freely, there had to be room. And the biggest obstacle standing in the way wasn't a lack of knowledge or technique. It was the presence of ego. When someone steps into a healing moment with the mindset of, I am the source, the flow falters. The energy becomes cloudy, distorted, redirected by the need to be recognized. Cayce saw this pattern clearly. Where there was spiritual pride, the healing became inconsistent or shallow. But where there was spiritual humility, something else entirely happened. The field cleared, the vibration strengthened, the channel opened. Humility in this sense isn't about self-deprecation, it's about alignment, about knowing your role, knowing the energy isn't yours, and being okay with that. It's letting go of the need to be impressive so that something far more powerful can do what only it can do. And ironically, the less credit you need, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because you're no longer taking up space, you're creating it. This is why Cayce always paired healing work with personal responsibility. If you wanted to be a channel for something higher, you had to live in a way that reflected that frequency. You had to care for your body, your emotions, your mind, not out of vanity, but because the vessel matters. And that's what leads directly into one of the most overlooked aspects of spiritual healing, the influence of vibrational nutrition and lifestyle. Cayce believed that food isn't just fuel, it's frequency, what you consume, how you rest, the choices you make throughout your day. They all play a role in shaping your spiritual receptivity. The body isn't just a passive container, it's a communicator, a resonator, and when it's nourished with the right kind of energy, through clean foods, balanced rhythms, and intentional living, it becomes more capable of receiving and holding the higher vibrations that healing requires. This wasn't about rigid rules or restrictive habits, it was about awareness, about paying attention to what lifts your energy and what dims it. Some environments drain you, some conversations tighten your chest, some meals leave you feeling heavy in ways that have nothing to do with calories. Cayce taught that when you start to observe these patterns, you begin to live in tune, not just with your body, but with the spiritual intelligence behind it. And as you live more consciously, something unexpected begins to shift. You find clarity. You begin to feel lighter, not just physically, but energetically. Your intuition sharpens. You sleep deeper. You notice things that used to blur by. This isn't just about health, it's about access. The more aligned your vessel is, the more available you are to become a clear instrument for healing, for yourself and for others. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how your daily choices either raise or restrict your connection to divine energy, and why the subtle habits you build matter more than most people realize. Put down in the comments, I choose alignment. There's a quiet kind of transformation that begins when you start noticing how the smallest decisions shape the energy you carry. What you eat, yes, but also what you think, what you say to yourself, how you move through your day. Edgar Cayce saw this clearly. Every action, every thought, every subtle choice either draws you closer to the frequency of divine alignment or pulls you away from it. Healing isn't just something that happens during isolated moments of prayer or reflection. It's woven into the fabric of your daily life. And this is the part most people overlook. They search for profound spiritual breakthroughs while ignoring the everyday habits that quietly shape their spiritual clarity. But the truth is, your vibration doesn't wait for a retreat or a ritual or the perfect external conditions. It responds right now, to the food on your plate, to the mindset you adopt when you wake up, to the language you use when speaking about yourself and others. Healing is always listening. Cayce didn't preach perfection. He encouraged consciousness. He taught that when you live with awareness, you begin to build a kind of spiritual rhythm, a consistency that keeps your energy field clean, clear, and more available. To receive the higher frequencies of the Christ vibration, you begin to feel more connected to your own body. You sense more quickly when something feels off, and you naturally start choosing what strengthens you, not out of discipline, but because it simply feels better. But what happens when this clarity isn't cultivated alone? That's where one of the most powerful elements of Cayce's work comes into play: the concept of group vibrational amplification. He discovered that when individuals with shared intentions come together, not to demand, but to offer, not to perform, but to align, the energy shifts dramatically. There's a resonance that builds between people when their hearts are pointed in the same direction. It's not just symbolic, it's energetic, measurable, tangible. When a group holds the frequency of healing together, the field becomes stronger than any one person could generate alone. It becomes a kind of sacred echo chamber where divine energy gathers, magnifies, and begins to move through the space with greater impact. Healing accelerates, emotions rise, clarity deepens. Cayce called these spaces spiritual vortexes, and they often produced results that even the most experienced practitioners didn't expect. It's in those moments that the hidden truth becomes obvious. We were never meant to heal alone. There's something in our design that responds to shared presence, to the honesty of sitting with others, hearts open, intentions aligned, not as a performance, but as a collective act of surrender. And in that surrender, the energy begins to rise, not because we push it, but because we make room for it. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how spiritual community and shared service amplify healing far beyond what we can access individually, and why your presence in that space matters more than you might think. Put down in the comments, "I feel the energy rising." There's something undeniably sacred that begins to unfold when a group comes together, not out of obligation, but from a shared longing to connect with something higher. When the focus is divine love, not personal gain, a kind of spiritual chemistry ignites. Cayce called these spaces spiritual vortexes, and what he described wasn't poetic metaphor. It was energetic truth. The moment intention harmonizes across multiple hearts, the vibration amplifies. It expands beyond individual effort and becomes a collective force with a reach far greater than the sum of its parts. You can feel it in the room. The stillness thickens, emotions soften. Walls that individuals carry for years begin to dissolve without needing to be torn down. The energy flows more freely because no one is clinging to control. Everyone is simply present, open, honest, and willing to hold the frequency of healing together. That's when transformation begins to take root in ways you can't always explain. Not just for one person, but for everyone participating. Because in that field of shared intention, healing doesn't need to be pushed, it's invited. But what sustains this energy once the gathering ends? That's where the fifth principle of Cayce's teachings becomes more than a concept. It becomes a practice. He called it vibrational persistence through service, and it's one of the clearest insights into how to maintain a lasting connection with the Christ vibration. It's not enough to feel aligned in moments of prayer or meditation. The deeper integration happens when you take that frequency and live it out, consistently, through acts of kindness, compassion, and selfless support of others. Helping others isn't just a moral virtue, it's an energetic act. Every time you serve without expectation, you affirm your alignment with the vibration of divine love. You move the energy outward, and in doing so, you reinforce it within yourself. Cayce saw this again and again. The most effective healers were those who gave not because they wanted to be healed, but because they recognized healing was never meant to be hoarded. It was always meant to flow. And when you make that your mindset, when service becomes your default state, something shifts in the way life responds to you. Synchronicities become more common. Insights arrive when you need them. Emotional resilience deepens, not because nothing touches you, but because you've anchored yourself in a higher purpose that lifts you above the noise. This is the hidden architecture behind spiritual strength. It's not about appearing enlightened. It's about quietly choosing to be a source of light, day after day, regardless of recognition. And when that becomes your path, the Christ vibration doesn't just visit occasionally, it starts to live within you, guiding your decisions, coloring your relationships, becoming the silent pulse behind everything you touch. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how one particular story from Cayce's documented readings reveals the full impact of this vibration when applied with pure intention, even in the most hopeless circumstances. Put down in the comments, "I choose to be a channel." There's something undeniably powerful about the moment your motivation shifts, not from a place of wanting to feel better, but from a deeper place of wanting to be useful. That quiet decision to serve, to support, to uplift, without needing anything in return, creates an energetic opening that even the most advanced techniques can't replicate. Edgar Cayce knew this truth intimately. He witnessed it firsthand. When healing was pursued solely for personal relief, the results were often short-lived or incomplete. But when that same healing journey was driven by the desire to become a channel for others, everything changed. The energy became purer, stronger, lasting. It's a subtle but critical transformation in mindset, and it's where many people unknowingly get stuck, seeking healing as a way out, instead of as a way through, because the real breakthrough happens when you begin asking not, "How can I fix this?" but "How can I offer this? How can my experience, my wounds, my wisdom, my growth, be of service to someone else?" This kind of service isn't loud, it's not performative, it's lived, and the vibration it creates is unmistakable. According to Cayce, this selfless alignment doesn't just support the Christ vibration, it amplifies it. It makes you a stronger receiver, a clearer transmitter. The more you pour out, the more flows in, not as reward, but as resonance. And perhaps no story captures this more vividly than one of Cayce's most remarkable cases. A woman brought to him in a condition considered hopeless by every medical expert she'd seen. Her body was failing. Her time, they said, was running out. But Cayce, tuning into her energy field, saw something they didn't. He didn't just see disease. He saw spiritual grief, a kind of sorrow so deep it had embedded itself into her cells. She wasn't just sick. She was disconnected, wounded in spirit, and her body was simply reflecting that dissonance. But what's astonishing isn't just what he saw, it's what he prescribed. He didn't offer medication. He didn't propose radical intervention. He offered a path of vibrational alignment, a blueprint of spiritual practices designed not to cure her, but to reconnect her to the divine current that had been blocked by years of unresolved pain. Prayer, meditation, service, forgiveness, acts of compassion, a full energetic reset, not focused on survival, but on surrender. And she followed it. What unfolded in the months that followed would challenge every conventional understanding of healing. Her condition didn't just improve, it reversed. Her body began regenerating. Her energy returned. And more than that, her sense of purpose was reborn. She didn't just get her health back, she became a healer, dedicating her life to helping others access the very vibration that had brought her back to life. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into what Cayce uncovered within her energy field that traditional medicine completely missed, and how emotional pain, when unaddressed, silently alters the body's ability to maintain health. Write in the comments, "I believe in energy healing." Sometimes the body speaks what the heart never had the words to say. That was the hidden truth Edgar Cayce brought into focus. A revelation that illness is often the echo of an unresolved emotional history. When he looked beyond the surface of that woman's suffering, past the physical breakdown and clinical labels, what he saw was spiritual grief, a kind of energetic residue left behind by years of unexpressed sorrow and silent disconnection. Her body wasn't just deteriorating, it was carrying the weight of what her spirit hadn't yet been able to release. Grief doesn't always shout. Sometimes it lingers quietly in the background of our lives, altering our chemistry, closing off our vitality one layer at a time. And over the years, that accumulation, of emotional pain distorts the energetic blueprint the body depends on to stay balanced. Cayce identified these distortions not just as psychological burdens, but as vibrational blockages, interruptions in the natural flow of divine life force through the body's energy centers, places where love, light, and healing couldn't fully reach. But the path he offered wasn't one of force or fear. It was gentle, it was sacred, it was personal. He didn't try to remove the pain. He guided her to realign herself with something deeper than pain. Through practices like meditation, prayer, self-inquiry, and daily intention, she began to reconnect with the source of energy that had never truly left her. The difference was, she now had the willingness to return to it. This journey wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about remembering what was whole. And that remembrance brought her healing, not in a single flash of light, but in a slow, sacred rhythm, one prayer at a time, one breath at a time, one decision after another to align with love instead of fear. That's the behind-the-scenes process few talk about, the quiet discipline of divine attunement. It's easy to underestimate the impact of spiritual practices because they don't always deliver immediate results. But what Cayce emphasized was that their power isn't in intensity, it's in consistency. When she committed to this path, something in her physiology began to respond. Cells started behaving differently. Her nervous system settled. Her energy system, once fragmented by loss, began to harmonize. The physical transformation was undeniable, but the real miracle was internal. She went from being defined by her suffering to being led by her spirit. And that shift, subtle, brave, transformational, became the foundation for a new chapter, not just of survival, but of contribution, of presence, of purpose. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how the cellular memory of trauma can be reprogrammed by spiritual frequency, and why reconnecting with divine love changes the biology of healing at its very root. Write in the comments, healing is remembering. Some transformations are so profound that they defy conventional explanation. They don't fit inside lab reports or diagnostic charts. They leave even the most seasoned professionals shaking their heads because the shift that occurred wasn't mechanical, it was vibrational. That's exactly what happened to the woman Edgar Cayce helped. After months of deep inner work, of showing up for herself with quiet consistency and spiritual commitment, her health didn't just improve, it completely reversed. Not only did she regain her physical strength, but she also stepped into a renewed sense of purpose. She became a guide for others, a living testament that healing doesn't always come from outside interventions. It often begins from within, in the subtle spaces no one else can see. And here's where the impact of Cayce's work becomes impossible to ignore. Medical professionals had no framework to explain what had taken place. Her diagnosis had been clear, her prognosis definitive, but the outcome, it didn't match the science. And yet it was real, documented, undeniable. This was more than a spontaneous remission. Cayce understood what had happened because he'd seen it before. He called it a restoration of divine frequency, a reactivation of the soul's original alignment through the Christ vibration. This wasn't about religion. It wasn't about belief. It was about resonance, about tuning the body, the mind, and the spirit back into harmony with a frequency that had always been available, but had gone silent beneath years of emotional static. That's what made the healing possible. Not magic, not luck, but attunement. She remembered her connection to divine love, and her body responded. Her cells responded. Her life changed. And the most powerful part? She didn't keep it to herself. She used her recovery as a doorway into service. She chose to become the same kind of vessel that once lifted her. There's something sacred in that choice, a decision to turn healing into legacy, to become a mirror for others, so they too could see what's possible beyond limitation, diagnosis, or despair. That ripple effect, that expansion, is how the Christ vibration continues to move through the world, one awakened heart at a time. Cayce never promised instant miracles. What he taught was far more profound, that healing is a journey of remembrance, a path of realignment that, when walked with faith and intention, opens the body to the intelligence of spirit and the spirit to the wisdom of love. And in that space, miracles don't feel like anomalies. They feel like the natural outcome of finally coming home. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how the Christ vibration doesn't just support healing, but works in harmony with medical treatment, enhancing results in ways modern science is only beginning to explore. Write in the comments, "I've felt this shift too." There's a misconception that still lingers in many circles, that to follow a spiritual path of healing, you must reject modern medicine. But that's not what Edgar Cayce taught. In fact, he emphasized the exact opposite. His vision was never one of separation. It was about integration. He saw spiritual healing not as a substitute for medical treatment, but as a necessary complement, a vital layer that speaks to what medicine can't always reach, but which, when combined, has the power to accelerate transformation on every level. This perspective reframes everything. It brings compassion into the clinical. It brings presence into the prescription. Cayce understood that illness is multidimensional. It's not just cells misfiring or organs malfunctioning. It's energy that's been disrupted, stories that haven't been released, emotions that have been stored for far too long. And while medicine can stabilize the body, it's the vibrational work, the soul-level alignment, that makes space for real, sustained healing to occur. When both approaches are honored, when you receive the care your body needs while also tending to the spiritual intelligence behind your symptoms, something incredible unfolds. You begin to notice that treatments work better, that recovery happens faster, that resilience builds from the inside out. The body stops fighting and starts cooperating, because it finally feels seen in its wholeness, not just as a system to be managed, but as a vessel of sacred communication. This is the hidden truth many are beginning to awaken to, that healing is most effective when all parts of the self are involved: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, all tuned into the same intention, all aligned with the frequency of restoration. Cayce didn't dismiss medical science. He believed it had its rightful place, but he also knew that science without spirit is limited, that something vital is missing when we ignore the energy that animates the body in the first place. And that's where the Christ vibration becomes a powerful ally. It doesn't interfere with treatment, it amplifies it. It brings peace where there's anxiety, clarity where there's confusion, trust where there's fear. It opens the energetic channels so that healing, whether delivered through medicine, surgery, therapy, or rest, has space to land, space to integrate. Because the real power doesn't come from one method over another. It comes from the alignment of all levels of being, moving together toward wholeness. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how this frequency becomes a tool not only for healing the body, but for understanding the spiritual roots behind physical symptoms through what Cayce called vibrational diagnosis. Write in the comments, "Mind and spirit must unite." Not every cause of illness can be seen through a microscope or detected by a scan. Some origins lie hidden, not in tissue or bone, but in the subtle spaces of energy, memory, and emotion. Edgar Cayce had an extraordinary gift, the ability to tune in beyond the surface, to feel where a person's energy had fractured, and to sense the emotional undercurrents silently shaping their physical reality. He called this process vibrational diagnosis, and it was built not on science as we know it, but on spiritual attunement, the kind that listens with the soul, not just the senses. This wasn't mystical guesswork. Cayce's readings consistently revealed precise, personal insight into each individual's condition, and more importantly, into the emotional and spiritual roots beneath it. He would describe a childhood trauma stored in the abdomen, an old resentment blocking circulation, or a grief so deep it was suffocating the lungs. These weren't metaphors. They were energetic realities, vibrating just beneath the skin, waiting to be brought to light. What Cayce understood, long before it became popular to talk about mind-body connection, is that healing can't be complete unless the emotional wound is acknowledged. The body, after all, is a mirror. It reflects what hasn't been resolved, what's been suppressed, what still needs to be seen and honored. And unless that hidden layer is brought forward, even the best medical treatments can only go so far, because the symptom may be addressed, but the source remains untouched. That's the hidden truth so many are now rediscovering, that full recovery requires emotional honesty. It asks us to stop, bypassing what's uncomfortable, and instead meet it with compassion. The body responds to that meeting. It softens, it trusts, it begins to release the energy it's been holding on to for years. And suddenly, what felt chronic, what felt irreversible, starts to shift, not just because of physical intervention, but because something finally clicked on a soul level. Vibrational diagnosis isn't reserved for the gifted or the psychic. It's something we all can develop when we learn how to feel beneath the noise. It begins with presence, with listening differently, with asking better questions. Where am I holding pain? What truth have I been afraid to speak? What part of me still feels unsafe to be seen? These aren't diagnostic tools in the traditional sense, but they open doors. Doors Cayce walked through with grace, and which we're still learning to unlock today. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how certain sounds, frequencies, and spiritual music can help realign the energy field and assist in clearing the emotional residues that block the body from returning to its natural state of balance. Write in the comments, "I trust what I feel." There's a reason why certain sounds move you before you even understand why. A certain melody, a chant, a single note sustained in stillness, it bypasses logic and speaks straight to the places inside you that words could never reach. Edgar Cayce knew this well. He taught that sound is not just art, it's energy in motion, carrying frequency, intelligence, and healing potential when directed with spiritual intention. This wasn't philosophy for him. It was observation. He saw, time and time again, that people exposed to vibrational sound practices, chants, prayers, sacred music, shifted more quickly into receptivity, into harmony, into alignment with the Christ vibration. Because when the body is tight, when the mind is crowded, when the heart is guarded, healing has to work harder to break through. But sound softens all of that. It doesn't demand. It invites. It reminds the nervous system that it's safe to let go. It clears the fog, steadies the breath, slows the racing mind. And in that space, something sacred happens. You return to the rhythm of your own soul. Cayce understood that everything in creation vibrates. That healing isn't just about what we do. It's about what we resonate with. And certain tones, when infused with reverence and clarity, carry the capacity to realign us with divine frequency. It's not about the performance of music. It's about the presence within it. A softly spoken prayer, a whispered mantra, a harmonic drone. These become more than sounds. They become pathways back into coherence. And coherence, as Cayce taught, is where the real magic begins. Because once the body, mind, and spirit are vibrating in unison, healing becomes natural. The resistance melts. The energy flows. There's nothing left to force, only space to receive. And in that state, even long-standing patterns of dis-ease can begin to unravel. But it's not just about listening, it's about participating. Your voice, too, is an instrument. When you sing, when you speak truth, when you let your sound carry intentional love, you're creating resonance not only around you, but within you. You become the tuning fork. And as your frequency lifts, everything connected to you begins to rise with it. This is the behind-the-scenes power of vibrational healing through sound. It doesn't require you to understand it. It only asks you to be willing, to show up, to allow, to let the sound work its way through the layers of noise until all that's left is clarity, openness, and connection. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how forgiveness, not just as an idea but as an energetic release, clears the very blockages that even sacred sound cannot penetrate until the heart is truly ready to let go. Put down in the comments, "I hear the healing." There's a weight we carry that no scan can detect and no prescription can lighten. It sits beneath the surface of our daily lives, shaping our posture, dulling our joy, and hardening the edges of our hearts. Edgar Cayce understood this weight intimately, not as a metaphor, but as a measurable force in the energetic field. He called it what it truly is, unforgiveness. And according to him, it is one of the most significant blocks to healing, not because it punishes us, but because it disconnects us from the very frequency that could restore us. Forgiveness, as Cayce described, isn't just an emotional shift. It's a vibrational breakthrough. When we hold on to resentment, when guilt is buried and shame goes unspoken, the energy of the body doesn't lie. It contracts. It stiffens. It vibrates in ways that make it harder for divine healing energy to pass through. The mind might move on. The face might smile, but the frequency remains fractured until we choose to release. And release is the right word, because that's what forgiveness actually does. It frees, not just the one being forgiven, but the one doing the forgiving. It opens a space within you where grace can finally flow. Cayce witnessed this repeatedly in his readings. People who had reached every other level of spiritual practice, prayer, meditation, intention, even sound healing, would still hit a wall if they hadn't truly forgiven. Because divine energy will never force its way through a locked door. It waits for your readiness, your surrender. This is why forgiveness isn't weakness. It's power. It's the ultimate act of energetic realignment, where the soul says, I no longer choose to carry what was never mine to hold. Whether it's anger toward another or punishment toward yourself, that stored emotion becomes a static field, distorting the harmony your body longs to return to. And while some wounds cut deep, the longer we grip them, the further we drift from our natural state of openness. Cayce didn't see forgiveness as a one-time declaration. He saw it as a practice, a spiritual decision made again and again, each time the memory resurfaces. And each time we choose love over bitterness, softness over defensiveness, we reclaim more of our own energy, more clarity, more flow, more space for divine healing to do its quiet, invisible work. There's a reason forgiveness is so often the turning point in deep transformation. It's not about forgetting. It's not about condoning. It's about no longer vibrating at the frequency of pain. When you release, you rise. And when you rise, healing becomes not just possible, it becomes inevitable. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how prayer and affirmation, when practiced with sincerity and vibrational clarity, anchor the healing frequency within you and help maintain alignment even in the midst of daily life. Write in the comments, I let it go to heal. There's a subtle power in the words we speak to ourselves, more than most people ever realize. Edgar Cayce taught that thoughts are vibrations, and when shaped intentionally, they can become the very tuning forks that bring us into harmony with divine energy. This isn't just about positive thinking. It's about vibrational precision. Every word carries a frequency. Every prayer, every affirmation, every intention spoken with sincerity echoes through your energy field and begins to shift the patterns within you. That's why Cayce emphasized vibrational prayer and affirmation not as religious routines, but as daily practices that recalibrate your internal state. Imagine your consciousness as a vast, complex instrument, sometimes in tune, sometimes not. And each time you affirm something aligned with truth, something rooted in divine love, it's like striking the exact note that gently brings you back into resonance. Not just emotionally, but energetically, physiologically, spiritually. He taught that consistent, heart-centered prayer and affirmation aren't meant to plead for healing. They're meant to align you with it. When you affirm that healing is happening, that peace is present, that love flows through every cell, you're not just reciting hopeful phrases. You're broadcasting signals. You're reminding your nervous system, your cells, your subconscious. This is the vibration I choose to hold. And when that choice is made repeatedly, something begins to stabilize. You stop being pulled by every emotional tide. Your inner environment becomes clearer, lighter, more receptive. Even when challenges come, the core vibration holds, because you've cultivated a foundation of coherence, a steady frequency that mirrors the Christ vibration Cayce spoke of. But this isn't only for you. Cayce believed that when you pray or affirm with purity, not just for your own healing, but with the sincere desire to become a vessel for the healing of others, your energetic field strengthens even more. It expands. It radiates, and people feel it. They may not be able to explain it, but your presence becomes different, calmer, more grounded, and that resonance can become an anchor for someone else's breakthrough. This is the deeper impact of vibrational prayer. It's not about volume or repetition, it's about truth meeting intention. A whispered affirmation filled with faith holds more power than 100 empty words, because the universe isn't responding to what you say, it's responding to how fully you mean it. When your thoughts, emotions, and spirit align with the words you speak, the energy becomes unmistakable. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how to embody these principles through daily choices that gradually rewire your perception, elevate your state, and make your life a living channel for divine vibration. Write in the comments, "I speak life into my healing." There's a rhythm to healing that doesn't begin in the body. It begins in the quiet, deliberate choices we make when no one is watching. Edgar Cayce spoke of this often, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. The way we think, the way we speak, and the way we show up every single day becomes the architecture of our energetic state. Healing is not a destination. It's a frequency we choose to align with again and again, moment by moment, thought by thought. And that alignment starts in stillness. Cayce emphasized the simple yet powerful act of beginning each day with spiritual attunement, not rushing into tasks or getting swept into distraction, but pausing to reconnect with the vibration of divine love. Not the concept of love, but the actual frequency, the sensation of warmth, calm, and expansion that naturally rises when we enter a space of gratitude. That emotion, when felt deeply, isn't just pleasant, it's magnetic. It draws divine energy to you and through you, effortlessly. Gratitude, as Cayce taught, is more than just a virtue. It's a vibrational gateway. When we give thanks, not just for what's easy, but for what's stretching us, healing us, and teaching us, we shift our signal. We stop resisting life and start flowing with it. And that flow is what allows healing energy to move freely through the system, touching not only the physical, but the emotional and spiritual dimensions of our being. But it doesn't stop there, because that same energy is shaped by what we feed it, and that's where our thoughts and words become tools or toxins. Cayce was clear. Constructive thinking and speaking aren't just positive habits. They're essential to sustaining the Christ vibration. Every complaint, every criticism, every internal judgment lowers the resonance of your field. And not just temporarily, it imprints, it lingers, it rewires. But so does encouragement, so does compassion, so does the quiet choice to speak light where there's confusion. This is the hidden truth behind lasting transformation. It's not about one big shift. It's about repeated micro-alignments that begin to build a new energetic baseline. You start to catch yourself mid-thought. You reframe before the spiral. You choose a word that uplifts instead of wounds. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're now aware of the impact every thought has on your vibration. And the more you align your thinking with love, the more magnetic you become, not just to healing, but to peace, connection, and purpose. You don't have to force your way into wholeness. You simply have to create an inner environment where wholeness naturally returns. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how the way you show up for others, even in small, unseen ways, becomes one of the most powerful practices for maintaining alignment with divine healing energy. Write in the comments, "I choose to think in light." There's something deeply alchemical about what happens when you turn your energy outward. Not for recognition, not to feel important, but simply because something inside you wants to give. Edgar Cayce often returned to this truth. Service is one of the highest forms of spiritual attunement, not just because it helps others, but because it keeps your own energy in motion, flowing, awake. When you step into service, whether through a quiet prayer, a thoughtful gesture, or just being fully present with someone, you're aligning yourself with a force greater than personal desire. You become part of a current that carries healing not only outward, but inward. This is where the unseen power of kindness reveals itself. Every act of care, every time you pause to check in on someone's heart, every time you hold space without judgment, you're expanding your own field. Cayce saw this as vibrational law. Energy that flows outward with love doesn't diminish, it multiplies. And what's returned to you isn't always visible, but it's felt. You begin to walk lighter. You feel steadier. You become a conduit of something that no illness, no fear, no hardship can override. Spiritual clarity. But that clarity is something you also have to protect. Cayce reminded us that just as food nourishes or depletes the body, so too do our thoughts, our environments, and the rhythms we move through each day. That's why adopting a vibrational lifestyle isn't about control. It's about coherence, about recognizing that your energy is sacred and everything you expose it to matters. The music you listen to, the conversations you engage in, the energy of the spaces you inhabit, all of it becomes part of your frequency. This isn't a call to perfection, it's a call to awareness. The more you become aware of what expands your spirit and what drains it, the more empowered you are to choose alignment, and those choices add up. You begin to notice how certain foods affect your focus, how specific people influence your mood, how clutter in your space creates fog in your thinking. It's not about judgment, it's about discernment, a quiet, loving commitment to cultivating a life that supports your healing from the inside out. That's what makes the Christ vibration so profound. It doesn't require rituals, titles, or hierarchy. It responds to sincerity. It flows through open hands, clear hearts, and those who are willing to turn daily moments into sacred expressions of light. And when your lifestyle reflects that intention, you're not just healing, you're becoming the kind of presence that heals by being. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how practicing spiritual healing with others not only strengthens your connection to divine energy, but becomes the very path through which your own transformation deepens. Write in the comments, "My energy is sacred." There's a quiet shift that happens the moment you stop seeing healing as something mystical reserved for a gifted few, and start seeing it as something you're already capable of. Edgar Cayce believed this wholeheartedly. Healing, in its truest sense, is not about power. It's about presence. It's about letting your heart become a space where divine energy can move freely, without ego, without agenda, without fear. That's what makes you a healer. Not what you do, but how deeply you allow yourself to be a channel for something greater than yourself. Whether it's through prayer, a gentle touch, a word of guidance, or simply holding space with sincerity, these healing techniques don't require perfection. They require devotion. Cayce taught that anyone can access this potential, not by learning elaborate rituals, but by consistently showing up in love. It's a matter of training the heart to listen more than it speaks, to soften rather than control, to serve instead of seek recognition. Healing flows best through humility, and humility, when lived authentically, becomes one of the most powerful vibrations on the planet. But here's the hidden truth. It's not about mastering a technique. It's about embodying a way of being. That's why Cayce didn't describe the Christ vibration as a formula or a method. He described it as a lifestyle, a lived commitment to embodying divine love in everything you touch. Every interaction becomes sacred. Every decision becomes intentional. You begin to carry healing not just in what you do, but in how you exist, in how you breathe, in how you show up when no one is watching. This path isn't loud. It's not flashy. It's made up of quiet choices, small gestures, moments of surrender when it would be easier to resist. And those who persist, those who keep choosing love when it's hard, who keep showing up when it's inconvenient, who keep forgiving when it would be easier to walk away, they begin to access something far beyond themselves. They begin to awaken a healing force that doesn't just shift their life, it ripples outward, often in ways they never even see. The impact is subtle, but it's undeniable. You walk into a room and something shifts. People feel calmer around you. You don't have to say a word. They just feel safer, more open, more connected. That's not charisma. That's alignment. That's what happens when you carry the Christ vibration not as a theory, but as a lived truth. You become a vessel of healing by simply being who you are, clear, grounded, and deeply attuned to love. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into how spiritual persistence, practiced in the quiet moments of daily life, becomes the foundation for lasting transformation, inner peace, and the kind of purpose that radiates beyond you. Put down in the comments, I choose to live as a healer. If you've made it this far, then you already know. This wasn't just information. It was a reminder, a quiet nudge back to something you've likely always felt, deep down. If this message resonated with you, if it stirred something real inside, then this space is for you. You're not walking this path alone. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to keep exploring this kind of content, where spirit, healing, and real transformation meet in a grounded, meaningful way. And if you reached the end, let me know in the comments by writing, "I'm with you until the end." That way I'll know we're walking this journey together. A like on this video is always appreciated. It helps me know that this kind of message is making a difference. There's a video right here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me over there. Let's keep going.